And so now we'll move on to Grizedale then, if that's okay, which was obviously, like you say, it was before Wooden Boulder, but we'll talk about it now.
And also after Ashdown.
Yeah, but after Ashdown, yeah. So I know it's obviously in the late 70s. It's an incredibly important period for you. I think your second son was born in 77. You had an exhibition at the Arnolfini in Bristol. Ashdown obviously planted in 77. You had a fletched over ash exhibition in 78 in London, Chester and Cardiff. You had your first overseas project as well in Yugoslavia, which was supported by the British Council in 78. And obviously Wooden Boulder was in 78 as well. So Grizedale Forest was a 3-month residency. What were the origins of that? How did that sort of materialise as something?
There'd been an artist placement group, APG, by London artists, and they'd managed to get residencies in industrial situations.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them were making things in steel. And Arts Council were very keen then on getting the arts to be more accessible and more social, more, because they're a public body. It's public funding. So they wanted to sort of de-elite it in a way. They wanted to get it out more people. So this was part of that idea. And then it occurred to somebody that an artist like myself, it wouldn't really be appropriate to put me into a factory. But what about a woodland? I think it was Alistair Warman whose idea it was, and Northern Arts were keen. There was a particular forest, Grizedale Forest, which had the theatre in the forest, initiated by Bill Grant, who was the head forester there.
Yeah.
So this was it was already set up, really, in terms of public access. And they had the Great Silurian Way. So it was advertised, and I applied. I got interviewed, and then I was asked to be one of the first. Richard Harris was there before me. The circumstances weren't good for him. And so he came back later and did some very, very good pieces.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the idea was to put work on the Silurian Way, to work on the Silurian Way. So people, again, this public access.
Yeah.
So people could see an artist working and then talk to them. But that became impossible because, I was using a chainsaw, and you don't know if somebody's immediately behind you. And 100,000 people walking there every year. So you're talking all the time. So I worked off the Silurian Way and I put work on the Silurian Way. So that was one aspect. Another aspect was that it hadn't got off to a very good start. The workforce, there must have been about 20 forest workers there, were very scathing and skeptical, mocking, I guess. And so I realized I had to try to change this round. So I parked my car where they assembled in the morning, and I would be going to work, loading my car with the saws, and going to work when they were going to work at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
I think it was 7:30. And then when they were coming out of the forest at 4, they could still hear me working. Mm-hmm. So that was like making a statement about that. And of course, with a chainsaw, if somebody's, you can hear the awful sound of a chainsaw. Now also, I wanted to make something very accessible, and I'd already made a small running table.
Yeah.
Before I went to Grizedale, and I wanted to make a big one, and the wood was perfect for it. And within, I think, 3 weeks, I'd got this piece made, and I put it up. And because they've got deer, big red deer, they're seen in the forest. Yeah. And they got picnic tables. So this idea of a running table was sort of connected.
Yeah, I love that piece. It's a large piece. It's a lot larger than what you think, isn't it? It's quite a big. I've seen obviously photographs. It isn't there now, but the running table, I believe, was the first work in the park, because obviously, like you say, you were the second residency there. But Richard Hamilton, he put his work in after that had already gone up, because you did it quite quickly, like you said, running table in 78 as the first sort of work there, which is quite interesting. And you did mention then about some of the response to the workers, and you not winning them round, if you like, but you certainly did win them round. Some of the staff there. There's a book called The Sense of Place, which was Sculpture in the Landscape, which refers to this sort of, and there's Dr. Stephanie Brown writes that due to the fact that Grizedale was a working forest, and the quote is, "The pressure to work hard and consistently is probably greater in a residency situation which works fixed hours. David Nash experienced this as one of the first sculptors at Grizedale when he felt he had to impress the less enthusiastic of the foresters and workforce and convince them of the validity of his presence. One way of doing this through a self-imposed routine of exacting labour. So in the respect of the workforce, I started work every day at 7:45 a.m. and worked on long after they had finished. I love that. And then the other quote is from, like you say, the chief forester, which was Bill Grant. And this was his memory of your time in the forest. And I love this quote. It's brilliant, this. And it says, David, a born communicator, rapidly broke down the local opposition and demonstrated in a spectacular way that sculptors are not only creative, but damned hard-working people with integrity, vision, and engaging skills in the use of natural forest materials. I love this now. Glancing out of my window at 8 a.m. one morning, I was amazed to see David driving past in his Morris Minor with a huge 30-foot-long tree strapped to the top. The sort of thing which we would normally use a timber wagon. I can just, that's amazing.
I hadn't heard that before, actually. But I know what he was referring to. Because the next piece I made was this big tripod. Because I'd made some tripods before, but this was a chance to make a really big one. So it was a single, long, slightly bent oak, which I split into 3 parts.
Yes.
The horns were a branch which went off at the top, which then was split.
Yes.
And so there were 2 parts of that, and then there was a 3rd part, all from the same tree. And then I wrote the top, and I can't remember how we got that up. But anyway, it was 25 foot or something, and it was against the bright sky at a long vista going up towards it. So it was a real sort of landmark. Yeah, I ought to say at this point, before we go on, that there was a lot of opposition, and I think 2 years later, some people with chainsaws cut the running table and the tripod up.
Oh, good grief!
One night. So Peter Davis, head of the Northern Arts, he phoned me up and said, got some bad news. And I called them radical ramblers, because a lot of people go for a walk and they don't want to see art. They're expecting to see art or something they're not familiar with, so they're annoyed by it. So hence the radical ramblers.
That's brilliant. I love that.
But I went back in winter of 81 and I made a second running table. And the ends of the branches I used for the legs, which met the ground, were mostly sapwood, and that they rotted out. So that had to come out after a couple of years. Yeah. It wasn't safe. And in 86, I went back and I made a much bigger one.
Right.
I was more skilled then, and I think that sort of had a similar fate, but it's not there now. But anyway, what's made in the forest with wood can't be seen as they're going to be permanent works. And something
you've accepted that. That's part of you, isn't it? You've accepted that. That's part of the cycle of nature.
They need to go. When they're dead, they need to go. And there is a similar project in how it started out in northern France, northern Italy, Artiselle, which all the work is made in a riverbed. So when the melting snow, it's a raging stream.
Yes.
The time of the residency, there's no water there at all, or hardly a trickle. Mm-hmm. So all the work is made there in the stream, and then in the winter it'll be washed away.
Yeah.
So the next lot of artists who came back, they then had a clean slate.
Right.
Start again, but then people started to make things and then put them off on the bank, and then sure enough, 2 or 3 years later, they're dead. They look forlorn and starting to fall to bits, and they're not moved. They need to be moved. So things,
I mean, some of the other work you produced there. I mean, I think there was at least 8 that I've sort of read about. I don't know how many are still survive, if you like, but one that definitely Wooden Waterway, I think, survives, doesn't it, to some extent?
Well, it survived for 10 years. That was the last thing I made, and that was from the experience of one of the things that my family, or my wife and I, and our little kids were looking forward to, was to be out of the rain in Blinder. But we didn't know that Grizedale is the second. So we started in February because I wanted to be in the forest coming out of winter into spring. I really wanted to experience that and be there for 3 months. So we stayed in the forest for 3 months. We went to Windermere, obviously, and Hawkshead, but we just stayed local. So the ground was really, really wet. Every day I went to work, I was trudging through wet ground. And then when spring came, it was still raining a lot, but the ground dried up. And I realized it's all gone up into the trees. Now you can read that in a book, but to actually physically experience this change in the ground quality, but actually drying out, although it was still raining. The volume of water that is going up into the trees as they started to work when the spring started and I became aware of this water and wood connection. So I wanted to make something that's a connected water and wood, and the wooden waterway was the result of that. So there's the Silurian Way, and there was a little stream which ran under the Silurian Way in a pipe. It came out, and near there was a fallen oak which was lying with its trunk down a slope, and then just below that there was I think a sycamore fallen. So the root plate was up in both trees, and they were both lying down. So I thought I could run the water with a trough. I could run the water through the roots of the oak down. If I cut a trough, it would run down there, and then I could take it off the oak and run it in a trough into the beach.
Yeah.
Through the roots of the beach, through the back of this root plate, and down the beach. And then that's what I started. And it took about 2 weeks to make, I should think.
Right.
And I thought it lasted about 6 weeks. But this is something which engaged the public of the 100,000 people walking along the Silurian Way. Enough of them, particularly families with young kids who spotted it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that visible, but if they spotted it and they worked out what it was and it wasn't working, the leaf had got stuck in it and the water was pouring off, they would figure that out. Or if one of the connecting sluices, which were made of branches, if that had slipped out, they would put it back in and prop it up. And so it started to change. And then when one of the sluices broke, somebody made a new one. They went on for at least 10 years. It was still running,
That's incredible. No, I did see somewhere a post not that long ago that it is sort of still, somebody got it reworking again. It's incredible. Not even that long ago. So it's incredible.
Well, the idea is that when I'm having a show in the Grizedale, it's changed so much up there. The theatre in the forest is no longer there, but they have a proper centre there and a proper cafe.
Yeah.
There was nothing like that before. There was a courtyard, which is where the workers assembled, kept their tools. And then there was an office block where the office places, like all stables, really been converted, which is where the executive worked. And then across the little stream, there was a wood mill, which was a functioning wood mill belonging to the forestry. That's now a bike hire place. There's a cafe, proper cafe, and there's a proper gallery now. Which is very nice gallery.
I'm definitely going to go to the exhibition now.
Well, they've invited me to make a show, and it just seemed, and because they're still doing residencies there, and because this residency was very important to me, I thought I would focus the show around that time. So I've got drawings I made, which I've had framed. I dug them out of my archive, and there's a drawing of the waterway I did, and then the wooden boulder was really very connected to the wooden waterway, in that I took the water to the wood in the waterway, and I've taken the wood to the water in the wooden boulder. Yeah. Then in 1982, I had a project in Japan. I made a river tunnel. So there's this hollowed out log, which I rolled into a stream. So the water runs around it and it runs through it. So that's another continuation of that theme.
Yes.
And I made a waterway in a museum courtyard, which had a water source running down channel diagonally across this. So from this project, I got a lot of branches and took them down, and we made a waterway. So that's what the show is about. There's another form based on the same principle of squaring up part of the 4 parts to make the running table, which became standing frame.
Yeah.
Because it's really the same idea, but instead of making a table or putting them flat together, one can construct a square frame, which is supported by branches naturally growing out. The other pieces that I made, there was a willow ladder. I'd learnt that if you just stick a fresh bit of willow into the ground, doesn't matter which way up, it will root. Yeah. It's fresh. And so I got 2 willows, put them in upside down, so all their branches were going into the ground, and I put rungs across the trunks.
Yes.
And hoping that would sprout, which it did. It did start to sprout, but then the deer came and ate it. One learns, but these are just ideas really. And I was very impressed by a big larch tree, which was growing out of a slope, a hillside, at like a great saber growth it's called. It sort of swoops out of the ground. It gave it a tremendous sense of energy. Of course, the foresters really are trying to avoid that happening because they're losing a lot of wood, of potential straight wood. So I planted, I think, 9 trees, which Bill Grant rather reluctantly agreed for me to do, and they were each penned to keep the deer off them, to grow in as a larch enclosure, sweeping larch enclosure. So they were growing out of a slope. But they died of windburn, which something I didn't know about, but the cold winter wind funnels up this space where I planted them, and they just got.
Well, these are the risks, aren't they, with working with natural materials and natural processes?
And one starts with a concept and an idea and a lot of ignorance. So it's just by trial and error. But I have made, back here at Kind of Coed, I did the same idea with larch.
Okay,
I see. They're really big trees.
I did read that you laid out some ground rules. There's some here which was for your time in Grizedale. This was the 3 ground rules that I read. That the sculpture should work with the environment, using the materials that the forest naturally has to offer. The sculptor should acknowledge the relationship of the forest and those who work in it, using their materials and tools and calling on their experience of planting, growing, tending and cutting. And the placing of the sculptures should activate otherwise neutral spaces and not occupy areas that already have a positive sense of place. I think they were sort of three.
Yeah, that last one was very important to me. I was horrified later in, I think, 86. I went and there's a very beautiful little glade.
Yeah.
That was perfect, empty, but the trees around it and the shape of it and the sense of being there. There was a sculpture in the middle of it, and I thought, and it didn't enhance the place at all. It just occupied it.
Yeah, that's it. But so there you go. So you feel like you took a lot from the experience then at Grizedale onto your further practices, because it was in the 70s, and then in the 80s, what I gather, a lot of the time in the 80s and the 90s, you were working away from Capel Root quite a lot, many overseas visits and creating work in other countries. And did the Grizedale experience help you with this at all? And the processes?
Well, yes, it gave me that, a degree of confidence. I felt it was a successful residency on a lot of levels. So the idea of working where the tree fell rather than hauling bits of tree back up to my studio.
Yeah.
That started there, because you're actually working in the space of the history of that tree. Mm-hmm. We're only working with naturally available wood was another aspect of it. The show at Air Gallery, which came after it, Fletcher Brash, which we made a little book with, that was a very important show to me, because somebody saw it from a big American museum, who then consequently I got included in a British art show there.